Hello and welcome back, everyone. We're back with another captivating exploration of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI, a book by Dr. Alok Aggarwal that's redefining our understanding of technological evolution. Last time we were talking about the world's aging population and how it's slowing down. It really got us thinking about how does that impact the future of work with all the AI and the automation that's happening.
Yeah, it did.
Today, we are diving into the jobs are likely to be lost and gained because of this fourth industrial revolution by 2050. We're also going to look at the impact of climate change on the job market and what other new jobs we might see emerge. Get this, the sources predict that millions of jobs could be lost to automation, but also millions created in fields you might not even expect.
Whoa, that's a lot. Millions. Well, it's not just about losses though, right? It's about transformation.
Okay, transformation. So let's unpack this fourth industrial revolution thing. What exactly does that mean, and why should we care?
Okay, so think of it this way. We've already had 3 major industrial revolutions. The first one brought us the steam engine, the second gave us electricity and mass production, and the third one introduced computers and the internet. So this fourth one, as the book explains, is about AI, robotics, and automation all coming together to kind of change the way we live and work.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's get to the part that, I think everyone's a little worried about, the jobs that might disappear. The book mentioned a pretty eye-popping number. Almost 400 million jobs globally could be automated by 2050.
Yeah, the author cites the Frey and Osborne study, but he goes deeper into the types of jobs at risk. It's not, robots taking over the world. Instead, it's jobs that are heavily reliant on routine and predictable tasks that are most vulnerable. Think of things like data entry, manufacturing, even some aspects of accounting and legal work.
Wow, so even white-collar jobs are not safe.
Not necessarily.
I guess it makes sense, though. If a computer can do it faster and cheaper, then companies are probably going to replace human workers.
Yeah.
But what about those jobs that require creativity?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Even creative fields are seeing the impact of AI. We're talking algorithms that can compose music, generate art, and even write articles. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that human creativity is doomed.
Oh, okay.
The book emphasized that while some creative tasks may be automated, the need for human oversight, critical thinking, and the ability to work with these AI tools will only grow. Imagine a musician using AI to compose a melody and then using their expertise to arrange it, add emotion, and turn it into a full-fledged song.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. So while we might see some job losses, it's not all doom and gloom. There will be new opportunities too, right?
Absolutely.
What are some of the jobs that are likely to be created thanks to this fourth industrial revolution?
The book lists a wide range of emerging fields, many of which center around AI and data. Data scientists, AI ethics specialists, robotics engineers, and cybersecurity professionals are all in high demand.
Yeah, those are the ones we hear about all the time. Anything a little more under the radar?
Well, one that caught my eye was the data labeler.
Data labeler?
Yeah, it might sound a bit mundane, but it's essential to how AI learns. Think of it like this. You're learning a new language. You need examples and practice to understand it right. Data labeling is similar for AI. Algorithms need massive amounts of data to be categorized and labeled by humans so that they can learn patterns and make decisions.
So wait, even with all this automation, we'll need more humans involved in some way?
In a way, yes.
That's kind of reassuring, actually. It's not just about robots taking over. It's about humans and machines working together.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big factor shaping the future of work: climate change.
Right? Because that's not going to impact jobs at all.
Well, it's not just about what we do, but where we do it. The book points out that climate change will cause job losses in some areas due to things like extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and shifts in agricultural productivity. But on the flip side, it will also create a surge in demand for jobs related to renewable energy, sustainability, and climate adaptation.
Okay, so maybe learning to code is a good idea?
Yeah.
But I should also brush up on my solar panel installation skills, just in case.
It's certainly not a bad idea to diversify your skill set. We're talking about a potential shift in geographic job hubs. Some areas will be hit harder by climate change than others, leading to migration and new opportunities emerging in more resilient locations.
This is a lot to digest. So far it sounds like major job disruption is coming. But it's not just about losses, it's about a fundamental shift in how we work,
Absolutely.
what skills we need, and even where those jobs will be located.
One of the most fascinating takeaways from the book is that, just like the past industrial revolutions, this one will likely last until 2050 and create industries we can't even imagine right now.
Wait, really? Give me some concrete examples of what that might look like.
Well, take flying cars. The FAA just granted permission to Aleph Aeronautics in June 2023 to develop commercial flying cars. Can you imagine an entire industry emerging around something that sounds like pure science fiction today?
That's mind-blowing. So what kind of job landscape are we looking at?
By 2050, we're looking at some fascinating shifts. Around 395 million jobs might be lost to AI and automation, but at the same time, about 135 million new jobs in data science and AI will be created. We'll also see around 15 million jobs in entirely new fields like data labeling and annotation.
So it's not about jobs disappearing, but transforming.
Exactly. These technologies won't just change jobs, they'll fundamentally alter human behavior, thought processes, and our entire way of living. The key will be adaptability, creativity, and continuous learning.
The possibilities are truly endless, and that's precisely the point. We need to be prepared for a future of work that's constantly evolving, where adaptability, creativity, and a willingness to learn new skills will be more valuable than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's now dive even deeper to see how climate change is going to, completely reshape the job market. Specifically looking at what those changes could look like by, say, 2050.
All right.
And one thing that really jumped out at me in all this research was this idea that fighting climate change could actually lead to a massive job boom. Not just a few green jobs here and there, I'm talking potentially millions of new jobs created.
Wow.
It seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does, at first. I mean, you think about it and, yeah, you would assume it would be all about job losses.
Right, exactly.
But when you actually dig into the data, it starts to make a lot more sense.
Okay, so walk me through this.
Well, there is this report from the International Finance Corp.
The IFC.
Yeah, that's them. And they did this analysis on 21 emerging markets. And what they found was that if these countries invested just 2% of their combined GDP over like a decade, specifically between 2020 and 2030, it could lead to a whopping 213 million new jobs.
213 million. That's almost like creating a whole new country's worth of jobs.
It is, yeah. The scale is pretty mind-boggling.
It really is. But okay, so 2% doesn't sound like a huge amount, especially when you consider the potential payoff.
Right? It's a relatively small investment for a huge return.
But what kinds of jobs are we actually talking about here?
It's definitely not just one specific sector, that's for sure. The IFC looked at like 8 key areas.
8? Wow.
And some of them are pretty surprising, I think.
Like what?
So for example, decarbonizing heavy industry. It's like using this thing called carbon capture, utilization, and storage.
Hold on. CCUS? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, CCUS.
That's a mouthful.
I know, right?
And to be honest, it's like heavy industry doesn't exactly scream eco-friendly to me. So how does that even work?
Well, think of it this way. Instead of all those carbon dioxide emissions from factories and power plants just escaping into the atmosphere, we capture them.
Okay.
And then we can either use that CO2 for other industrial processes, or we can store it safely underground.
So basically, locking it away so it doesn't mess with the climate.
Exactly. And the IFC thinks this alone could create something like 22.5 million jobs. And a big chunk of those CCUS jobs would be in the building materials sector, like making concrete, but doing it in a much more sustainable way.
So we're kind of taking these industries that already exist and figuring out how to make them climate friendly, which then creates all these new jobs in the process.
Exactly.
That's really fascinating. So what were some of the other unexpected job creation areas?
Well, another big one is climate-smart agriculture. That one's projected to create over 40 million jobs.
40 million? Just from agriculture?
Yeah. And it's not just growing like organic veggies or something. It's a whole approach to farming that's all about increasing food production, but at the same time, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and making those farms more resilient to all those climate impacts we keep hearing about, like droughts and floods and all that.
So it's kind of like future-proofing agriculture.
Yeah.
It's 40 million jobs tied to agriculture in a world that, everyone says is becoming dominated by technology.
Yeah.
Wait, so can renewable energy also create that many jobs?
Absolutely. The electricity grid decarbonization is huge. We're talking about potentially generating 61% of global power from renewable resources by 2050, up from less than 25% right now.
And how many jobs are we looking at?
About 18.9 million new jobs, just from transforming how we generate electricity. The solar and wind tech has gotten so much cheaper that it's actually feasible now.
That's mind-blowing. And isn't there something about distributed generation too?
Great point. Distributed generation is basically about turning homes and farms into mini power plants. Imagine millions of rooftops with solar panels essentially becoming part of the energy production system.
So people's houses could actually help generate electricity?
Exactly. And that approach could create another 23.9 million jobs. It makes the entire energy grid more resilient and provides electricity access to remote areas that were previously off-grid.
This doesn't sound like the traditional view of green tech being expensive or impractical.
Not at all. These are practical, job-creating solutions that also address climate change. Waste management is another frontier. Investing in low-carbon municipal waste and wastewater systems can create 23.4 million jobs.
Really? Waste management?
It's about more than just collecting trash. It's about creating systems that reduce flood risks, improve community health, and even generate renewable energy from waste processing.
It's kind of a powerful statement about the future, isn't it?
It really is. And what's really wild is that this IFC analysis is just a snapshot. They only looked at 21 emerging markets. The author actually did some extrapolating based on their model. And if all countries invested in this kind of climate change infrastructure, we could be looking at over 360 million new jobs globally by 2050.
Wow, so almost double what the IFC projected.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It just totally flips the script on this idea that going green is going to cost us jobs. But I'm guessing it's not quite as simple as just throwing money at the problem and boom, all these jobs magically appear.
You're right, it's definitely more complicated than that.
So what are we missing?
Well, that brings us to a really important point, the skills gap.
Okay, what's that?
The IFC report points out that a lot of these climate-related jobs, they're going to require trade skills.
Trade skills.
Yeah, like electricians, plumbers, mechanics, those kinds of hands-on professions.
So not like computer programmers and software developers.
Not necessarily.
That's really interesting because it's a very different skill set from what we usually hear about with, the future of work. All that stuff about coding and AI and all that. So are we saying that learning to code is becoming less important than knowing how to, install solar panels or something?
I wouldn't say less important. It's more that we got to recognize that the future job market, it's going to be incredibly diverse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we need a workforce that's prepared for all sorts of opportunities. Everything from, high-tech stuff to those skilled trades we were just talking about.
So it's not an either situation. It's more like a boat hand.
Exactly. And the reality is we've got a bit of a mismatch going on right now.
How so?
Well, a lot of our education and training programs, they're still very much geared towards those, digital skills, the computer stuff. But the demand for those skilled trades, especially in these new climate-related fields, it's growing like crazy.
So are we saying we're headed for a situation where we've got all these amazing green jobs, but not enough people who actually know how to do them?
It's a real possibility.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential upside, this future where fighting climate change actually leads to millions of jobs. But what happens if we, just stick our heads in the sand and pretend the problem isn't there? What's the cost of doing nothing?
Well, the World Bank actually took a look at that. And they don't paint a very pretty picture. Their estimate is that by 2050, something like 216 million people could be displaced within their own countries because of climate change.
216 million. That's just an astronomical number of people forced to leave their homes.
It is. It's hard to even wrap your head around a number that big.
And I'm guessing displacement on that scale is going to have a pretty devastating effect on the job market, right? If you're having to flee your home, finding a stable job is probably the last thing on your mind.
It is. Yeah. You're just trying to survive at that point. And even beyond just displacement, there was this UN report, I think it was from 2021, and they projected that if we don't do anything to mitigate climate change, it could lead to a net loss of 80 million jobs globally by 2050.
Wow, 80 million. That's almost as many jobs as we were just talking about being created.
It is. Yeah. It just goes to show you the stakes are incredibly high here.
So we're not just talking about an environmental crisis anymore. It's an economic one, too.
Exactly. We're talking about millions of jobs lost. People's livelihoods just completely upended, whole communities destabilized. It's a really serious issue.
It really paints a stark picture, doesn't it? It feels like we're at this crossroads.
Yeah.
We're on one path, we embrace climate action. We create jobs, we build a more sustainable future.
Right?
And on the other path, well, we face mass displacement and job losses in a world that's just increasingly ravaged by climate change.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to put it. And it really highlights how urgent this situation is. We can't just sit around and wait any longer.
Okay, so what's Dr. Aggarwal's take on the whole future of work thing?
Well, as we discussed, he lays out two very different scenarios, and they kind of hinge on how we deal with climate change. If we really try to combat climate change, he actually predicts that we could gain around 1 billion jobs by 2050.
1 billion? That's almost hard to imagine, but I'm guessing it's not like everyone just hops into a brand new career.
You are right. The book points out that we could actually end up with a global worker shortage. Even with all those new jobs, like something like 215 million people short.
Hold on. So more jobs, but not enough workers. How does that even make sense?
It all comes down to something called the support ratio. Basically, it's the ratio of working age people compared to the total population. And globally, it's shrinking. Basically, a larger aging population and fewer young people entering the workforce.
So, does that mean companies are going to be begging for employees, like crazy signing bonuses and unlimited vacation days and all that?
It's definitely a possibility. That kind of tight labor market could really shift the balance of power towards workers. But of course, it's not just about the numbers. We also have to look at what types of jobs are being created and lost, and if people even have the right skills to fill those new jobs.
So it's not just this simple story of robots took our jobs. There's this whole demographic shift going on under the surface.
Exactly. And this is all assuming we try to do something about climate change. Dr. Aggarwal paints a very different picture if we don't.
Okay, so let's hear it. What happens to jobs if we just ignore climate change?
He predicts job growth in this scenario too, but less dramatic, like 950 million gain versus 475 million lost. But the real twist here is that we could end up with a surplus of workers, around 225 million globally.
So instead of not enough workers, we'd have too many. That doesn't sound so great.
Yeah, it raises some serious concerns. More unemployment, super tough competition for jobs, potentially even worse inequality.
So no matter what we do about climate change, it sounds like big changes are coming to the job market. Makes you wonder, if someone's listening to this and they want to be ahead of the curve, what skills should they be learning? Is it all about coding and AI now?
Well, those technical skills are super important, especially in STEM fields. But Dr. Aggarwal really emphasizes that it's not just about being tech-savvy. He sees a growing need for what he calls human skills.
Human skills. Okay, now you've got me really curious. What does that even mean?
Think about those things that are really hard to automate. Complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, leadership, emotional intelligence.
So it's not about trying to out-robot the robots. It's about figuring out how to work with them.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just tech skills versus human skills. The author points out that technological revolutions always have some unpredictable outcomes. New industries pop up, new jobs that we can't even imagine right now.
Okay, yeah, that's the really exciting part. Like a few decades ago, who would have guessed that we'd need social media managers or drone pilots? What kind of crazy jobs might exist in 2050 that we haven't even dreamed of?
Fun to think about, isn't it? But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute and look at some specific jobs Dr. Aggarwal predicts will be lost or gained because of this fourth industrial revolution.
Okay, let's get into the details. What kind of jobs are we talking about here?
Well, he says we'll probably see fewer jobs that are really routine or require a lot of manual labor. So things like data entry clerks or factory workers, maybe even some types of drivers, as automation gets better.
Okay, that makes sense. Those are the jobs you always hear about being at risk.
Yeah.
What about the flip side? What jobs does the author think will be in higher demand?
He predicts a huge surge in anything related to AI and data analysis, like data scientists, machine learning engineers, AI specialists who can really build and manage those systems.
So basically the people who build and train and understand the robots.
Exactly. And it's not just about having those hard technical skills. Remember all those human skills we talked about? Those are going to be super valuable in those fields too. Imagine someone who can build a really complicated algorithm, but can also explain it to someone who doesn't know anything about coding, or who can think about the ethical implications of that algorithm, or even teach the AI to learn new things.
So it's like part scientist, part artist, part ethicist.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just AI and data. Dr. Aggarwal also predicts growth in areas like renewable energy and sustainability. As we shift away from fossil fuels, we're going to need a ton of engineers and technicians and specialists to design and build and maintain those new energy systems.
So not only does tackling climate change help prevent too many workers, it also creates a whole bunch of new green jobs.
Exactly. And it's not just about the technical roles. Think about all the people we'll need to guide that transition. Policy analysts, project managers, communications experts. It's going to touch every part of society.
It's kind of wild to think that the decisions we make about climate change today could totally change what jobs exist in the future. But what about those unpredictable jobs we were talking about before, the ones that don't even exist yet? How do you even prepare for those?
It's tough for sure. But if we look back at past industrial revolutions, there's a lesson there. Being able to adapt and being willing to learn new things are crucial. So think about skills that will probably be useful no matter what your job is, like problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, communication.
So basically those same human skills that are important for those AI and green jobs.
You got it. Those skills are going to be the foundation for success in this crazy world, no matter what the future throws at us.
It's like we have to think of our careers like they're always evolving, not like one specific destination.
And it's not just about individual workers either. Businesses and governments and schools need to adapt too. How do we train people for these jobs of the future? How do we help workers transition to new roles? How do we make sure everyone has a chance to succeed in this new economy?
So it's not about retraining for one specific job. It's about building a culture where learning and adapting are just part of life.
You nailed it. There's one more point Dr. Aggarwal makes that's really interesting. He predicts a huge need for infrastructure development in a lot of emerging economies, places like Brazil, Russia, India, China, Indonesia, Mexico. He estimates that if they invested just 2% of their combined GDP in infrastructure, they could create 725 million new jobs by 2050.
Whoa. Okay. Now that's a number. What kind of jobs would those be?
All the backbone stuff. Transportation, energy, communication networks, the things a modern economy needs. And the cool thing is that a lot of those jobs wouldn't require super advanced degrees. You could get those jobs with a high school diploma or vocational training.
So there's opportunity for everyone, even if they don't go to college.
Exactly. Even with all this technological change, there are going to be jobs that need all sorts of different skills and talents.
Okay, so let's sum up what we've learned today. It seems like there's a chance of a worker shortage coming up, but there's also a ton of potential for job growth in fields like AI and sustainability and infrastructure. The types of jobs are changing too, with more focus on those human skills that are tough for robots to do. And who knows what crazy new jobs might pop up that we haven't even thought of yet. It's a lot to take in, but it's definitely going to be an interesting ride.
I agree. But instead of being scared of the unknown, I think there's a lot to be excited about. It's a chance to rethink what work even means, to create new opportunities, and to build a future that's more sustainable and fair for everyone.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the jobs that will probably be lost and gained by 2050 because of the fourth industrial revolution and climate change, plus some of the other potential job gains. It definitely feels like we're at a crossroads. But like you said, it's not about knowing exactly what the future holds. It's about understanding what the possibilities are and getting ready for whatever comes next.
You got it. And getting ready isn't just about learning specific tech skills. It's also about working on those core human skills we talked about, like critical thinking and creativity and adaptability and resilience. Those are going to be essential for any job market.
It's like we need to become future-proof by investing in the things that make us human. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of work isn't something that's just happening to us. We're actually creating it through the choices we make and the things we do, whether that's investing in our own skills or supporting policies that help workers, or even just staying curious and engaged with the world around us. We all have a role to play in building a future where work is meaningful and rewarding and accessible to everyone.
That's a really great message. And speaking of staying curious, I'm already excited for our next deep dive. We'll be revisiting Turing's imitation game and discussing how far we may be from accomplishing it, whether recent advances in neuroscience and other disciplines may help us in achieving this goal sooner, and the first 3 characteristics of previous industrial revolutions in the current context.
That'll be a good one. It'll be interesting to look at those historical parallels and see what they can teach us about the challenges and opportunities we're facing today.
So until next time, everyone, keep those brains buzzing. The future of work is a conversation, not a prediction. Let's keep exploring and learning and shaping the world we want to work in.
Yeah, it's not about knowing for sure what's going to happen. It's about exploring those possibilities and getting ourselves ready for anything. See you next time.